Hello everyone and welcome back to another album review. In this video I'm going to review Las Ruinas by Rico Nasty. This is the brand new mixtape of rapper Rico Nasty, in which I didn't necessarily get into it with that much high expectations. I didn't necessarily know what to expect out of this, but I was hoping for something at least a bit different and something that is more gratifying as a whole thing. Because when it comes to Rico Nasty, I've liked many of her works in the past. I believe that she has done some great songs and she has been also featured in so many great songs and in stuff that sound kinda more refreshing when it comes to a more modern hip-hop approach. She has a very distinct voice and I believe that it works really nicely when it comes to the more banging moments that she creates. The energy in her deliveries make her easily for me one of the most interesting female rappers of this generation. Unfortunately, when it comes to some of the more mellow stuff that she would create from time to time, I don't really believe that this approach works that well for her. And when it comes to full-length releases and previous mixtapes, I believe that they're kind of inconsistent. We get at the beginning some moments that are quite banging, but then the albums would end with those mellow moments that don't really work that greatly in my opinion. Now, the first mixtape in which it got a lot of attention was Nasty, in which I already got with high expectations since I already knew some of the stuff and the capabilities of Rico Nasty. So for me this release was pretty decent, but not necessarily what I was expecting. I believe that the production was kinda average for the most part. There was not something all that exceptional about the release. And also, while it started with some really hard-hitting moments, then as the album would progress, the album would just become more and more bland. Then we had the mixtape with Kenny Beats, in which there was a hope that we were gonna see an improvement on production. We got some pretty solid moments out of this project as well, but it was quite short and many of the tracks felt more of like a bunch of ideas being thrown together. And then we had her debut full-length album, in which I didn't really get with that high expectations since I was kinda expecting a more commercial sound, which was kind of the case. We still got some pretty decent moments, but once again, not a release that I would see myself returning to, finding something significant about it. I believe that this changes with Las Ruinas, which for me is undoubtedly the greatest as a fully fleshed out release that she has done so far. Many of the previous projects did manage to look like some sort of experimentation being going on, but in this case I was actually really surprised by the massive variety on this album. There's actually a lot going on to it. There are 17 songs and many of them actually go into directions that I wasn't really expecting. This album in some cases managed to exceed my expectations. There were still towards the end those more mellow tracks that I ended up not liking as much, but we'll get to that point later. What I want to point out with this album is that this is the first time where we actually see some quite new directions, especially with a full-length release, because the more different directions in her sound would be in some of the tracks that we'd see her featured, which I honestly was hoping to see more of this in her solo works. Like for example, I really like the direction of the track with Boys Noise, Girl Crush. This track was actually quite refreshing and it went into some directions that I was really looking forward to see more from Rico Nasty. And I believe that with the case of Las Ruinas, this is the closest we get into directions like this with a more electronic sound. We have many tracks over here actually that end up going into a drum and bass direction, which is certainly not something that I was expecting. We didn't even really see hints of a direction like this in the past, so I found it pretty interesting how it's actually one of the main things out of this album. We have many tracks over here that actually go into a kinda dark and quite interesting drum and bass direction. For the most part the beats are kinda basic, but they still get the job done, and it makes for many intriguing moments over here, like the track Intrusive. I believe it's a really great introduction, and as usual with Rico Nasty projects we start with the bangers, and Intrusive is definitely one of the most energetic tracks over here, and it's also kinda dark and kinda aggressive. It has many of the elements that I like when it comes to Rico Nasty songs, and I believe that there are some pretty refreshing elements to it as well. There's the track Vaderz, which goes into a more standard trap banger direction, which once again I believe that it works pretty fine over here. One of the shorter moments in this album. There could have easily been more to it in my opinion, but this track sort of feels like a freestyle, like even when it comes to the delivery, it feels kinda offbeat in some occasions, and it's the one thing that I didn't enjoy as much with this particular song. I believe that I would love it even more if the delivery was not so off-putting at some occasions, but still this is a pretty solid trap banger. Then there's the track Black Punk, which is definitely one of the most experimental moments in this album, in terms of just going in many different moods and genres in just such a short period of time, and I like how varied this track is, and I believe that all of the directions that it takes actually work pretty well. It is a pretty catchy and pretty fun song with a really nice dark and aggressive twist to it. Then after 3 pretty hard-hitting moments, we get the track Messy, in which I ended up not enjoying the features as much, and when it comes to the instrumental, it's a drum and bass song that goes into a bit of a more atmospheric side, and I believe that it works pretty fine, but due to some of the deliveries feeling pretty underwhelming in my opinion, I wouldn't consider it to be one of my favorite moments in this album. With the track Fucking Lady, we go to those directions of Rico Nasty that I don't necessarily enjoy as much. We have more of her singing voice with a lot of auto-tune. The beat feels somewhat basic and bland, but I would still say it is a kind of an enjoyable moment. But then we get the track 1 on 5, which was instantly for me, for the first time I've heard it, the most underwhelming moment of the album so far. And it's nice to see once again that there is an experimentation with this song as it goes into a different direction once again. We get sort of a hip house track over here, which I find to be a pretty interesting addition, just adding to the variety of this album, but I don't really feel that this track was executed all that well. It feels kinda generic, kinda bland, and some of the elements with the vocals and the instrumentals sound a bit obnoxious, so for me this moment was kinda underwhelming. But then we get back into the bangers with the track Gotsta Get Paid, which goes into a more old school rap direction, which sounds awesome over here. It has those G-funk sounds, a really cool beat, and I really like the delivery of Rico Nasty over here. I believe that it works pretty fine, and it's a really nice and catchy song. Then we have What's Your Man featuring Marshmello, which for me was definitely a really pleasant surprise. I've actually never heard something like this from Marshmello before, because this is actually a kinda dark and intense track. I was worried when I saw the name Marshmello. I was just expecting a really bland and generic song. But why don't we see stuff like this from Marshmello? This is actually really cool. We start with a drum and bass beat, kinda basic but still quite surprising, and then we get a trap banging moment, which actually sounds pretty solid. So even though it's a pretty short moment, really pleasantly surprised with this one. I definitely didn't expect something like that. Blow Me was a bit of a grower for me because it has definitely one of the most addictive and one of the most infectious choruses out of this whole project. It is a really catchy song, I like the atmosphere behind it, and even if the instrumental feels a bit lackluster, there are many great elements with the deliveries and the vocals that make it one of the highlights of this project in my opinion. And then we get a remix out of the track Jungle by Fred Again. Now Fred Again is a house producer that I discovered last year, and he has done some pretty interesting tracks. I like the way he samples vocals, he is pretty imaginative with the sounds that he uses. And Jungle over here has to be possibly his best song so far. This is actually an amazing, extremely catchy song, super imaginative with the way those vocals are being sampled. It is an extremely powerful, really catchy house garage song. It is amazing. There are not that many changes to the remix, it's more of the same, but we get 2 verses from Rico Nasty, which actually sound awesome. I really wanted more stuff like this. I love the energy that Rico Nasty puts in this song. It is really catchy, it is really powerful, and stuff like this just sounds so cool and refreshing. So yeah, excellent song from Fred Again, and a killer Rico Nasty remix, with undoubtedly the best highlight out of this project. Now after this point is where the album doesn't have some of its greatest moments in my opinion. I like the catchiness out of the tracks Dance, Screams, Cauliflower and Focus on Me. I believe they have some pretty cool elements to them, but it's at this point where we basically go into some more samey directions. It's at this point where it feels like the album sort of exhausted its creativity. This is more of like stuff going into directions that we've heard before and done a bit better with previous songs. They are still pretty cool songs, but they're not standouts. But then we get tracks like the Always Skit, which I find to be a pretty interesting moment with some of its sounds, as it's a pretty ethereal moment. The vocals are extremely heavy on reverb and there is a really nice ambience to this song. Beyond that, the track is kinda all over the place and it doesn't really seem to lead anywhere. It has some ideas but they don't really progress that much further. At the end of the day, this track does indeed get treated more of like a skit, but it's a kinda lengthy one. I believe that it's the one case where I don't really feel that it was all that much worth it with this particular track to go for 3 minutes long. And like I said, there are some pretty short moments over here, some pretty short tracks, but I believe that the pacing is overall pretty nice. I didn't really feel in almost any of the songs over here that they were really short or that I wanted necessarily that much out of them. I believe that they're paced just fine and that they get the job done, even in their short runtime. The track Easy was certainly one that I didn't enjoy. It is an acoustic ballad and honestly it's just that, there is nothing more to this song. Then there's the track Into the Dark, in which it goes once again into some more mellow directions, but at least this one has something more catchy to it. There's a bit of a more variety to the instrumentation, which is certainly a bit interesting, but once again, not one of the songs that I would see myself returning to. It was not one of the highlights. And then there's finally the track Chicken Nugget, another one of the tracks that goes into some really soothing moments and it sounds kinda bland. The instrumental and the vocals just sound pretty average, going into those directions that I don't really enjoy that much out of the sound of Rico Nasty. With that being said, I'm glad that we finally get a full-length project that manages to be consistent even though it's a big mess. It is definitely her most experimental work so far, going into the biggest variety of genres out of anything else she has done before, and I believe that those new directions work really well for her. It makes for some pretty refreshing moments over here that sound awesome. Some of my favorite Rico Nasty tracks are in this project, and yeah, while it's certainly not perfect, this is the first time where I can actually say that I really enjoyed a full Rico Nasty project. I do suggest you to go and listen to this album if you're looking for something more experimental and more refreshing in the hip hop scene nowadays. This project certainly has many things to like it and appreciate it for. I'm gonna give Les Ruinas a 7+ out of 10. What's your opinion on this mixtape? Like it, dislike it, why, and what you want to review next time? Let me know down in the comments. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video, subscribe for more content like this. Thank you for watching, I'll see you all in the next video. Goodbye.